steel. Sarah Bates is the owner. She came to us. She manufactured specialty steel for the automotive industry. And she said, look, I don't have a seat at the table. I'm not sure how. I mean, you're playing with the big boys here. You got all the big major general contractors. How can I get in? And we matched her up with our general contractor through a mentoring program. And a long story short, she was able to convert her steel process to be able to manufacture specialized steel for our casino. And one of our proudest moments was on the night of our grand opening. She came in and walked over to the exact wall and put her hand on it and said, this is where I signed in a Sharpie pen my name so that my grandkids one day can come through this facility and see that I helped build this economic development project, which is the largest economic development project, largest minority-involved economic development project in the history of the city of Toledo. So that is a great example of our mentoring program in action. The other example I want to provide, and I'll get to that, Jeff, is on the veteran side. There's a lot of talk about how we can support our veterans, and the government's doing great things for them, and private employers are doing a tremendous job providing resources for our veterans who come back from the war. We are looking for ways we can add value to this equation, and in fact, we're building a new racetrack and gaming facility in Dayton, Ohio. And one of the things that we have done is provide a cornerstone contribution to a pilot program with Central State University, which is one of the 105 historically black colleges and universities in America today, that in partnership with Tom Joyner, who's the #1 syndicated urban radio personality, has started a program to help reintegrate veterans into not only the education world, but ultimately into the workforce. And so there's the GI Bill, and that provides resources to be able to go to school. But then are these veterans able to successfully integrate into a system where, first, you got to understand the GI Bill. Second of all, you may be older than some of the other students. You may be dealing with physical issues. You may be dealing with psychological issues. And so this pilot plan is to try to help in all of those areas with the integration of these veterans programs. It's a program we're very proud of and would love to continue to update this board on as well. So how are we doing on these other projects I spoke about? When we come up with our diversity goals, we want to, again, be reflective of the community in which we operate, but then ask the question, is that it? Is that enough? Can we do more? Are there more lists? Is there a database that we've missed that we can maximize opportunities? And in Kansas, in Toledo, in Columbus, 3 of the facilities that we're proud to have built and opened in 2012, the answer was yes, we can do more than what was currently being done there. We can do more, indeed, than what we set forth for ourselves through a diversity consultant. And in fact, in Kansas, we exceeded our goal by 60%. In Toledo, 40%. In Columbus, 300,000%. Largely, I'd like to take a lot of credit for that, but we also chose a certified African-American contractor who performed much of the general contracting services on that project, which was great because they were a local business and we partnered with them. We're very proud as well of being the corporate champion of diversity and the National Black Chamber Corporate Partner of the Year. Finally, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Tim to just sum up. I've talked about this in front of the commission before, the importance of giving back to the community. And I've said before, one of the proudest things I do at Penn is serve as the chairman of our charitable foundation, where in 2012 alone, we gave close to $13 million to support local charities. But it's more than money. It's more than laying a check on top of a stack of other checks and attending a golf tournament. It's about building multi-year partnerships with these organizations, finding those organizations that maybe fall through the crack, that don't have the big press conference opportunities or the big marquee name, but maybe our contribution of even as little as $10,000 or $15,000 is what keeps that organization alive to provide support for the community the next year. And so we pledge to you that we would give back to our community, that we will not only write the checks but roll up our sleeves to be able to open our doors to things like blood banks and food drives and Blue Jeans for Babies Day with our employees and all the other wonderful things we do to try to support charities, not only within our local region, but across the Commonwealth. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Mr. Shippers, before you do,
Sure.
You mentioned the support of your board for your diversity initiatives. What is the makeup of your board in terms of gender and ethnicity?
Tim, you want to go through the list?
We have it's now a 6-member, I have to think because of the
Just
restructure.
changed, right.
Just changed. We have a 6-member board. It is entirely Caucasian and 1 female.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, thank you. And thank you, Commissioners. This is our last slide. Clearly, I want to leave you with one final thought, that our proposal, if we're fortunate enough to be awarded this license, clearly benefits the entire Commonwealth. If you look at all of the harness horse farms throughout the state of Massachusetts, where they're located, with the ability to continue racing at Plain Ridge Park, with the increased purses that they will receive going back into their communities, back into the businesses that they support through their patronage, and you look at the current vendor list of where all the vendors are that are supported by the track today, they'll have a stronger customer going forward. And with the casino operation there, they'll clearly will be able to add to our vendor list of businesses that we have within the Commonwealth. So simply put, if you look at the opportunity in front of you to grant us this license, it clearly will benefit the entire Commonwealth, from the Berkshires to the Cape and all points in between. I want to also let you know that there's nothing more important for me as the CEO of this company and our company as a whole than to, if we are successful in getting this license, then to make sure that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is proud to have selected Penn National and will offer a first-class facility, be a first-class employer, and offer an experience that will be unparalleled. So thank you very much. We're prepared to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you want to go ahead? Commissioner Zuniga, go ahead. Might as well go through our own formal list of questions, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. You mentioned the spin-off of the GLPI, and in your application, you also had, for funding of this project, the availability of credit facility, about $750 million. How is that credit facility changed, if anything, if any, with the spin-off?
It has changed. We have put together for Penn, new Penn, and for GLPI, new capital structures. We have a revolving credit facility now at Penn that's $500 million in size. We have available to us today about $475 million of available capital in that facility. On top of that, as we think about our ongoing operations, when you include all of our obligations, interest expense, rent obligations, we still will spin off from our businesses about $175 to $180 million of excess cash flow to support new developments as well. So we feel very confident with the new capital structure we have in place with Penn that we'll be able to fulfill all the obligations of this $225 million proposal.
Thanks. Also, as part of the questions, I see you gave us a binder with detailed explanations of some of the questions that we asked for you. Thank you for that. But could you also highlight your arrangements relative to leased vendors? You mentioned them briefly in your presentation, but just expound whether there's only that one license. Be good. Is that?
That is correct, Commissioner. We have plans for one third-party operation that would be a tenant within our facility operating out of the food court that we offer as one of our 3 venues at the facility, the food and beverage venues. All of the other offerings would be operated by Penn National Gaming, as well as the Flutie Sports Pub is a licensing deal.
Also, what times of the week and what times of the day do you foresee that you would be at capacity, and how would you propose to manage those operationally, those peak times?
Sure. Well, we hope the answer is daily. We would like to believe that certainly Friday nights and Saturday nights we're going to be pretty close to capacity. I did hit on that point when I spoke to the parking spaces of over 1,600 with 1,250 slot machines. And if you have employees parking off-site, we feel the parking is ample to handle one for each slot machine, as well as the number of food and beverage seats that we have. Racing peak times and gaming peak times typically don't overlap. And if we were to run special events, some of the simulated game shows or any outdoor activities that I mentioned in the last presentation, we would do those during the shoulder period. So we're very comfortable with our plans. We're very comfortable with parking, and certainly would work with the local officials if we felt like we need any help from a traffic perspective, but that's to be determined. We don't anticipate that at this time, given our traffic mitigation plans.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the very detailed responses to the questions. So I'm not going to go back through them, but pick up on some of the things that I've read, as well as some additional follow-up questions from your presentation which relate to the questions. The statute makes continual reference to minority women business-owned enterprises, as well as veteran-owned business enterprises. I heard a lot about your outreach to veterans themselves, but the evolution of veteran-owned businesses is a relatively new phenomenon as compared to minority and women-owned businesses. Can you share with me how do you undertake that strategy? I mean, they're looking for minority women, veteran-owned businesses in the development, the construction, and the operation of the facility. It's a challenge when we throw in that, you know, the administrative bulletin requires certain percentages set aside for the construction process. What sources can we tap into to identify specifically veteran-owned businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. I asked Jeff to actually go back to this slide because I think this can be helpful. One of the things that we like to do to identify any new business, whether it be a MBE or a WBE or indeed now a VBE, and what you pointed out was a kind of a new category, are things like reverse vendor fairs, where, you know, normally with a vendor fair, the vendors would set up shop and we'd go through the booth and we'd take some of their information. We'd say, that's great, nice to meet you, we'll hopefully be in contact later. With a reverse vendor fair, we put all of our guys in the gymnasium, so to speak, so that you have a booth and you have our procurement guy and you have our HR people and you have our operations people to talk about the different types of jobs. But the point is, those veteran businesses can also have an opportunity to come to us so that we can provide lists of the very detailed things, the services that we're going to need, whether it be on the construction side or on the vendor side on an ongoing basis. Secondly, we have a very strong general contractor in Turner Construction that has some experience in this area and has some examples that they can provide that we're going to rely upon. Third, we are going to be aggressively working with community organizations and veterans groups to try to spread the word about information fairs and forums where we can talk specifically on the veteran issue. So the point is, we will put the energy, the time, and the resources into developing what is, as you pointed out, maybe in many respects, a new database for us to do business with.
Thank you.
Sure.
A couple of the questions point to or address the issue of full-time, part-time employment. All of the applicants for the slots parlor license are balancing their first 2 to 3 years of operation versus increased competition when licenses are awarded for the resort casinos. How do we balance that in terms of, you know, you right-size the company, maybe there's a drop in full-time employment, how do you do that potentially without having a tremendously negative impact, as well as kind of a retention level. We certainly know in startups of any business that people come in, wow, this isn't really the job I thought it would be, I'm going to go somewhere else. How do you try to minimize retention? And it's a double, you're getting the point, it's a double question. How do you right-size the company with the increased competition potentially coming in Massachusetts, and then how do you focus on the retention side?
I'll take the retention and I'll turn over the part-time, full-time to Jay from an operational perspective.
Okay.
On the retention front, we do a considerable amount of work on the front end to ensure that we're hiring the right people, and that is very critical for us. You know, I mentioned the job information sessions we did a couple weeks ago. We'll continue to do those. It's a new gaming market. It's a community that gaming is a new enterprise for. It's important for folks who apply for positions that they understand that they're going to be working nights, they're going to be working weekends, they're going to be working holidays. So we spend a lot of time on the front end educating our potential employees. We have assessments built into our application process. So again, these are matched up to job-specific positions. So again, that's one other step in our hiring process to ensure that we're targeting the right people for the job. We don't want to hire somebody in a customer-facing position that just doesn't like people. So we want to make sure that we get the right people on the front end. Training our employees as they walk in the door, again, another critical component, and we spend a lot of time, energy, and resources in our training and development programs. Along the way, once they're on board, we have a very, very extensive employee engagement process. Every year, we do employee engagement surveys to understand what makes employees excited to come to work every day, why they like their jobs, and what we could be doing better. From those surveys, we do, again, a very extensive action planning process. Our managers are held accountable to ensuring high engagement levels and low retention. Low turnover numbers, high retention. So that's what we do on the retention of our employees. I think, the more time we spend, the better we get with openings. If you take a look at our retention from our first opening to our last opening, we get better every single time. And our hiring process is truly the key to making sure we get the right people from the very beginning.
Thanks, Corey. And to answer the second part of the question with regards to right-sizing the operation, and you hate to say you've got experience doing this, because it's not something that you want to have experience doing, but with the proliferation of gaming across the country, several of our markets have had new competition open the doors, whether it's across the state border or another casino within the same direct market. And so we've had to build this into our planning efforts on an annual basis over the last 2 to 3 years in particular. Corey mentioned or referenced the full-time, part-time, and I found it interesting just this year as we do these annual employee engagement surveys. Several of our properties, when we got the survey results back, our part-timers actually ranked higher from an engagement perspective than our full-timers, which is a little counterintuitive. And I think it's because we become very keen on what motivates a part-time employee. And it's largely schedule. So in the past, we may have had job openings and interviewed employees and said, we need you to work the following days and times for the part-time schedule. And our approach has changed where now we're interviewing for part-time employees. And the first question is, what days and times can you be here? And that seems to really have worked out where you have a happy part-time workforce. And the mix of full-time to part-time, it differs by market. We have some markets like Hobbs, New Mexico, where we are a majority part-time employees, and they're the highest overall engagement scores in the company. And then we have properties that might be more of an 80% full-time, 20% part-time mix. We anticipated it here in Plain Ridge, at least for the first 2 to 3 years, a 75-25-ish mix of full-time to part-time. One of the ways, Commissioner Stebbins, to answer your question, that you right-size the business is these casino openings don't pop up quickly. You know when they break ground. You typically know pretty roughly when they're going to open their doors, and so you put your plans in place a year, 12, 15 months in advance of the opening, and you start to shift your strategy. You might shift it from less full-time, more part-time. You may not backfill a few positions so that you're continuing to right-size as opposed to waiting for the competition to open, wake up one day, and then have to do a reduction in force. You try to avoid doing any layoffs, any reductions in force. And it also helps in our case that we have 26 other facilities across the country. We transfer people. We always have needs, certainly at the salaried levels, not as easily done at the hourly position, but we do try to manage the hourly right-sizing by thinking ahead and understanding what the right ratios and which positions really need to be backfilled in advance of new competition and opening up.
Okay. My last question is relative to a question in the booklet we talked about local hiring, local spending with local vendors. And the question asks you to define local. You've defined local as your host community and the 4 surrounding communities. With an aggressive goal of 90% of your hires coming from those 5 communities, is that a realistic strategy? You're talking about 540 employees coming from, or 580 if I'm doing my math right. Coming from 5 communities and spending 90% of that vendor-based money within those 5 communities.
I think-
Just looking for your thoughts on that, on how you make that work.
Sure. From a hiring perspective, we're confident we can make that happen 90% within the host community and the 4 surrounding communities. You're talking about a population that aggregates close to 100,000 people. And so when you're hiring 650 for the first 2 to 3 years and pre-opening 650 out of 100,000, just based on the employment rate, we think there's plenty of people to choose from within those 5 communities. From a vendor perspective, we're going to do as much sourcing as we can within those 5 communities. And it will likely stretch beyond those 5 from a vendor procurement perspective. We don't know all of the services that are provided today within those 5 communities. We have some learning to do. But we set our goals high because we want to deliver on our goals, and we want to be considered great within the community and certainly great within the surrounding community as a partner.
And I think if you look at our past 3 openings, we set very aggressive goals there for local hiring, and we were able to meet or exceed goals in all 3 communities.
Okay, and what were the 3 latest?
It was Kansas City, Toledo, and Columbus.
We were able to hire over 90% local in those cases.
Great, thank you.
Can I do one more quick question, since we were on the topic of hiring and labor? You mentioned labor peace agreements with the seafarers and the machinists. Do those agreements allow other unions to access to the premises? Or is it exclusive to those unions?
We're going to turn that over to our legal counsel.
Okay.
Only because he's our labor expert, not because we're afraid of the answer.
To the contrary, we're not afraid of the answer at all. Those are exclusive with those 2 unions. We did a great deal of research in the area. As Ms. Whitaker mentioned before, the Seafarers and Penn National have an agreement across the country and a long-standing relationship. They've got an awful lot of experience, so we partnered with our national partner and a local partner. And our experience is more than 2 unions in one shop actually creates a great deal of confusion. So we think we're well represented, and the neutrality agreements, which we've sent on to your staff for your review and study, are terrific agreements. They provide full access, full neutrality, and our experience is when you provide these kinds of agreements, the unions are able to organize in well over 90% of instances when these are signed.
So seafarers and machinists have apparently extensive experience with these job categories? So it's all the job categories in your shop?
That is correct, Commissioner Crosby.
Huh, interesting. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Over the last decade or so, unions have cross-pollinated into areas that don't necessarily resemble their original names.
20 years ago, with the advent of riverboat gaming in the Midwest and South, the Seafarers Union got involved.
Oh, interesting.
And that's how it got started.
And even to respond directly to your point, Chairman, in the advent of gaming in Detroit, for example, the UAW was introduced to the gaming industry through dealers, and now they've proliferated out as well. So it's just, you'd be surprised by the representation.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is that it, Commissioner? Commissioner McHugh?
I join my colleagues in thanking you for the detailed answers to the questions that we asked. And I think that because they were intended to be public Q&A bits, that we'll post them on the website so that everybody can see both what the questions were and what the answers are, because I think they're very helpful. So I only want to focus on 2 of the questions that were in my basket. The first has to do with the parking. You provided the estimated number of parking spots, and then there's a chart very helpfully breaking everything down by category. Where did the breakdown numbers come from?
I'm going to, again, defer here in this case to our head of design and construction who worked with the consultants on this. Jim Baum, you want to come up?
Here, Jim, take this.
Good afternoon, Jim Baum, Senior Vice President of Project Development. Thank you for your question. It was derived by the Plainville Zoning Board and their prescribed methodology of calculating parking requirements within the township of Plainville. And you'll see in the detailed response, there's an actual table that shows how those are calculated. And there's ultimately a 50% gross up factor for those things such as special events and related that would go beyond what their minimum standards are. And that's how those parking counts were calculated for the total facility.
So those came from the zoning code or from a specific discussion with the building department? A tailored discussion, I should say.
It was in consultation with our civil and traffic consultants, McMahon Traffic Consultants, and Tilton Civil Engineers, along with the zoning department.
But I'm really, I guess I should just get right to the question. How do you know that those are realistic numbers? Are they numbers that match your experience in other jurisdictions? Are they numbers that are pure zoning code in an area which really hasn't had an experience with casinos or with slots parlors before?
Commissioner, we started with the zoning code, but we also did a sanity check. We have parking analysis for all of our operations based on number of gaming positions, number of seats in our restaurants, whether we have racing or not. And as we looked at all of this and came up with the number of 1620, it was very consistent with what we had in our other operations. So we feel very comfortable that this will accommodate the load of customers. And as Jay said previously, in the case where we do have peak periods caused by unusual events, we have the ability to take our employee parking capacity and move it off-site to incrementally add capacity for the customers during those real peak periods, which happen from time to time.
Okay, thank you, because that was my next question. Do you have an off-peak site, a peak off-site site? Whoa. You get the drift.
Yes.
We do actually, but I prefer not to identify those because otherwise we don't have a definitive agreement for that at this point. And, you know, I would prefer, but yes, we have taken that into account. We looked at it relative to our host community agreement, and we believe that within the city of Plainville that we can accommodate off-site parking needs to any level that we may require.
My next question, and just a couple in this area as well, all of the site plans that you have furnished us today show a break in the highway right outside the entrance. Have you discussed that with MassDOT?
Extensively.
I'll bet.
We have gone through the entire MIPA process up to and including our final EIR, which includes a dispositive traffic impact study that was developed by our consultants and in direct consultation with MassDOT prior to its incorporation in that FEIR and being submitted to the MIPA. In addition to that, today at 1 o'clock, there was a meeting held with the Federal Highway Administration and MassDOT and our consultants to discuss the interstate access corridor, which was preceded by a meeting that was held with a companion developer on the north side of 495, such that they could look at whether or not there were any federal implications to the roadway improvements that we have proposed. I don't have the results of that other than to say that it was a very good meeting and I believe very favorable to the project.
That, no doubt, is good news. Is there a Plan B, though, if that break isn't approved?
Well, obviously, Plan B would be to take whatever improvements can be made with the current roadway configuration that has Route 1 divided,
Right.
Which means it involves modifications to the jug handle. Frankly, I think given the degree of coordination that we've done with MassDOT and the fact that our anticipated certificate prior to the end of the year is going to give us the ability to begin to put our definitive construction documents for the roadway improvements, in front of MassDOT for permitting in early spring of 2014. They do anticipate and they do request that we make the modifications to increase the right-of-way for signalization that would allow for the north-south dedicated turning pockets off of Route 1 into Plain Ridge Park Drive that is the entry to the facility.
They being MassDOT has requested that.
That is correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
If I may, Commissioner McHugh, we appreciate the line of questioning, quite frankly, with regards to MIPA and MassDOT. We've watched diligently our two competitive proposal applicants put forth timelines that we just don't understand how they're feasible, quite frankly, with the level of detail we've gotten into with MIPA and MassDOT. Our timeline is driven from those conversations and those consultations. We look at those timelines and say, that's just not possible. So again, I trust that you've had those conversations and will continue to have those conversations with those two agencies, but we've been concerned from what we've seen presented to you guys.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Cameron.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
I think Commissioner McHugh asked some of my questions. I'm dealing with the same traffic experts with the mitigation team. And we have had these same conversations about access. I think you answered my question about if that medium, the break in the medium is not approved. And I wanted to ask you more specifically, you did have some alternative plans mentioned in the application, one being a flyover option. And our traffic experts, we were discussing this. Are you prepared to build that if that is, I mean, that would mean acquiring additional land for you? I know you mentioned it as an option, but is that something you're prepared to do if necessary?
I'm going to give a response, Commissioner Cameron, and I may seek to have our traffic engineers give a more technical response if it's necessary. But when you're evaluating roadway improvements and you have to follow MIPA, MIPA requires that you pursue all possible alternatives with an equal vigor of their being a satisfied alternate. But that is a normal process that looks at all aspects relative to the environmental concerns. And ultimately, MassDOT will tell you what their preferred alternative is that they would like to see constructed. The flyover was one of the considered alternatives, but never was deemed to be serious because of many of the implications, some of which were sightline, some of which were the complexity and duration of such a project on a vital arterial roadway. But at the end of the day, MassDOT tells you what they want your improvements to be. They have clearly told us they want a signalized intersection, they want to relieve pressure on the jughead, and they want people to be able to go south and north on Route 1 and enter under controlled conditions into the site and have full and clear visibility, and at those peak periods to have the appropriate turn pockets and through lanes so that ordinary persons that are not making visits to your facility cannot be impacted. And as I believe if you look at our traffic study, you'll see that post-improvement, the level of service of that roadway system will be better than it is today, inclusive of our impacts on the project.
Thank you. Do I understand your answer to mean those improvements will or will not include a two-lane off-ramp? Is that one of the options being considered?
You're referring to the I-495 exit ramp?
I am, sir.
Yes, there's going to be an additional lane and a slight realignment of that exit ramp that would allow for traffic to proceed down Route 1 towards the facility.
Our traffic experts will be happy to hear that, so thank you for that.
Yes.
You mentioned a meeting with the federal transportation folks. That meeting occurred today?
It was at 1 p.m. today in Boston, yes.
Okay. Have you, and you did give clear answer on your timelines being based on these approval. If you are not able to get an approval that is necessary in a timely fashion, obviously that would affect your opening. Have you put some thought into that?
Commissioner Cameron, we don't think that the timeline, we have wiggle room in our off-site improvement calendar because what we're looking at is, obviously, you know, this part of the Northeast, you basically shut down roadway work during the winter months. You don't have batch plants producing roadway materials. The ground is too hard to do excavation and so forth. So basically, you have I believe that MassDOT essentially looks at something like a May 1 to October 31 primary construction period. So we anticipate that we will have our MEPA certificate during the statutory period, which would be prior to 12/31 of this year. And in fact, MassDOT confirmed to our consultant today that they will have their dispositive comments to MEPA by the due date of December 20th, which we view as being very, very good news. And as a result, we believe that we can file our definitive CD, you know, our construction documents with MassDOT to file and get MassDOT permits so that we can begin to disturb and perform the work in the right-of-ways during calendar 2014. And we anticipate all of that work, with the exception of ultimate final landscaping, being completed prior to the winter of 2014. The reason we don't see doing the landscaping is planting season precludes us from doing it in the dead of winter.
Thank you. One last question is the surrounding community agreements. Could we just, I know we had an update several weeks ago. Is there anything new to report at this time?
I got my seat back. Thank you, Commissioner. There are no additional updates than what we provided, which is that we are still in a dialogue with Foxborough that we hope will provide some movement. That meeting is on Friday. We will certainly keep this board up to date on how those conversations go.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Could I just add one thing? Because I started this, and I hate acronyms, but we used two frequently in that last series of discussions, MEPA and MassDOT. For the benefit of the audience, MEPA is Mass Environmental Protection Act. It's a review process that all major developments have to go through. MassDOT is the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So that's the interplay between the environmental folks and the Department of Transportation folks that we were talking about with respect to the interchange on the roadway.
I just have one other question. It's just, it's as much curiosity as anything else. You have made a business strategy that, to a large extent, has taken otherwise non-viable racetracks and turned them into viable gaming and racing facilities. And as I understand it, racetracks essentially, but for the Churchill Downs type venues, are virtually, you know, impossible to be profitable on a standalone basis. What are you doing? What's the theory? Do you get an economy of scale so that racing revenue is actually additive to your bottom line, or is it a loss leader? Or what's your business strategy?
The strategy is clearly, Chairman Crosby, we use these racetracks as development options. But we have a very sophisticated and experienced team of racing operation professionals led by Chris McErlane, who's behind me, that we operate these tracks at a break-even level today. So they're not a drain on earnings. We operate the facilities. For example, we have a couple tracks in Texas. You know, we're working in Austin right now to eventually try to convince that state to consider marrying racing with gaming there. It may take years. We think it's going to happen. It may take 10, 20 years. But that's our strategy, and it's worked in many other states. But the concern in the short term operating these racetracks during very tough economic times in this industry is to at least manage to break even with these operations and not have it drain on earnings.
And that's an obtainable objective. That is that is an essential part of your business plan that you can get.
It varies operation by operation, but when you put it all together and you
Right.
put the 9 or 10 tracks we have together, it's essentially break even. Now, we have some tracks that lose millions of dollars. We have some tracks that earn a couple $1 million, but when you net it all out, it's neutral.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Thank you very much. I think we will be finished. We'll ask you to come back at the end of the end of the day and have any closing comments if you offer closing comments if you want them. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time and really interesting and detailed responses to our questions.
Thank you.
We have several more groups to speak, but we have at least 2 members of the Great and General Court, our House of Representatives, with us, maybe 3, and we try to be respectful of their schedules because much of their lives is nighttime work. So I thought we would take a quick break and ask our state representatives in attendance to please come forward. And I see one representative right in front of us. Why don't you start?
Thank you very much for your consideration, Chairman Crosby. And in fact, I do have a nighttime obligation, so
I figured you might.
I'm delighted to have this opportunity. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the members of your very important committee for coming, and welcome to Plainville, which is a wonderful, wonderful community. It happens to abut the community that I live in, which is North Attleboro, and we have had just wonderful relationships over the many years. I no longer represent Plainville, but I have prior to one of our realignments of districts. And so I feel I'm very familiar with the community, the residents, as well as the surrounding area. Racing has been a constant in Plainville for many, many years. And there are many people in our region that are very much involved in racing in many aspects, both in the breeding and the care of the horses, their medical care, certainly all the various aspects of racing. And we're very concerned that those individuals who provide the hay, the tack, the veterinary services, and the breeders, of course, that their employment remain constant. One of the things that is most important to me as a state official, and certainly as a representative of this district, is the healthy economy of not only our area, but the state in general. And this has been one of the constant industries in our area, and we would like to see it continue and flourish under the very professional hand of Penn National. So we're delighted to be here to support their effort and what they're trying to do in this area. I have had many conversations with colleagues in the State House, as you might imagine, about this issue over the last several months. And what is very interesting to me is that some of my colleagues who don't live in this immediate area are very supportive of this effort going forward. And I'd like to tell you about a couple of them. You know my feelings because I've been before you most recently in Rentham and told you about how this area is indeed the center of the universe. And we have so many wonderful venues in our immediate area. And this would be yet another gem in our crown of jewels. And people certainly, as was explained to you earlier, be thrilled to come here to be able to take advantage of all the things that are present in our area. In addition to being at the crossroads of a highway system that makes access and egress from this area very easy for people, and I believe will have very little impact quite frankly, on the surrounding communities. However, one of my colleagues, Stephen Kulik, who comes from the western part of the state, and I believe may have sent you a letter, Mr. Chairman, and he lives way out in the west and is nowhere near us at all. But this project will have great impact on his district as well as ours, in that there are many horse breeding farms and a lot of open space out in the western part of our state. And those individuals who operate those horse farms are very concerned about this project. As you know, racing doesn't exist anywhere in this area, with the exception of Plain Ridge. And the idea that it would live on and promote this economic opportunity, not only for those who live here, but for Representative Kulik's district, who is 75 miles away from us, and yet very concerned that this effort go forward here in this part of the state. One of the other individuals who has contacted me and had conversations with me is Representative Paul McMurtry, who lives in the Dedham area. And he's a businessman, as many of our legislators are, and is very concerned about the economic effect that this will have on our section of the Commonwealth, all the way up to where he is and into the Rhode Island border. Because the people that will be drawn to this venue will have an effect far-reaching and beyond our particular area. So I think it's important for you to know that legislators from across our state are very concerned about this effort being successful, combining the casino license, the one casino license that we're allowed in our state, and marrying it with the ability to continue the racing industry is very important. And it's important for those far beyond our borders. And I thought it was very important to let you know today that there is that concern all across the Commonwealth. If we were to lose this opportunity, continue racing, it would mean unemployment for many, many people throughout our Commonwealth. And as I stated to you earlier, the economic health of our state and our people is very, very important to me. And that is what will make us successful into the future and provide opportunities not only for those of us who are of working age now, but for our children and our grandchildren into the future. And we want our area to continue to grow and to thrive and to provide a quality of life for our citizens that will make Massachusetts a desirable place to come and to live and to work. And for those of you who make these decisions, I know this is a tremendous responsibility for you, and I appreciate the fact that you are serving and that you have this burden on your shoulder. But I want you to think about the future of our Commonwealth and how the elimination of this industry will have an effect that will go into the century. It's very important that we continue this. There are children who are growing up in this Commonwealth now who have a history in their families having to do with the breeding of horses and the raising of hay and the desire to serve in the veterinary service to take care of those animals. And we need to be able to continue that and not to lose that history of our state that has been here for so very long. So I ask you to keep that in the back of your mind and to know that it's not just us here in Plainville and North Attleboro and Rentham and Mansfield and Foxborough who are concerned, but there are residents all over our state who are watching this very closely and are truly hoping that this is the location you will pick. I thank you very much for listening to me, You have a long night ahead of you, so I will take my leave. But thank you for being here, and I welcome you back at any time.
Thank you, Representative Hoyer.
Thank you.
Senator. Pardon me for going out of protocol. I should have invited the
no.
senator up first, but
I defer to Betty.
All right.
She served this district much longer than I have, and she is certainly a very vocal advocate for this district, and I appreciate her support of Plainville, even though she no longer serves here. I do have the privilege of following in very big shoes, hers as well as her husband's. Her husband, Kevin Poria, served in the legislature as well as a good friend and former colleague. I do welcome you here to Plainville tonight. This indeed is the center of the universe, and for those of us that live here. And I know that for the number of years that I've been in the legislature, which is now 8, I spent 3 terms in the House before going over to the Senate. This has been one of my priorities. I have a family that's been involved in harness racing. I had family members that have had horses at the former Foxborough track as well as Plain Ridge. And I realized that there really wasn't the appreciation amongst administrations on either side of what this industry means to the Commonwealth. I think one of the things that was made as a point by Penn National tonight was that they don't make money at the tracks, but you know, the families that have horses there, the families that are supported by it, the thousands of families at those 28 locations that earn their living that way, were able to educate their children and pay for their groceries and do all those things and be employed, certainly don't consider it not a benefit. So consequently, the fact that it doesn't make money doesn't mean it's not a good thing. So I think that's one of the messages that came through loud and clear to me tonight. And I know as I've been in there advocating every December for the 8 years that I've been in there, I have had to be involved in the simulcasting agreement every year that comes due at the end of the year. And because this is my district, myself and one other Democratic colleague from Taunton, David Flynn, who was the dean, had to be in there every Thanksgiving to New Year's Day opposing each other on the entities that we're trying to represent. And so I've learned a lot about Plainville, a lot about Plain Ridge, and come to a very deep appreciation for the types of people that are involved in them. And what I've seen with this new introduction of Penn National particularly to this equation is a class, an entrepreneurship, a business model that frankly hasn't existed for many people when they look at the gaming industry. I am so pleased to see an operation that has 28 entities in 18 different jurisdictions address the needs of the communities that they serve and have their jurisdictions in, and the way they treat their animals, the way they treat their people, and I think it would be a great addition to this area. Piggybacking on that, as I say, when I had an economic development commissioner out here a few years ago, and he was kind of looking at the area, and he thought he was out in East Chippewa, and I realized he really didn't have an appreciation for where he was. But even in the few years since then, if you realize we've got Rentham Village premium outlets literally within minutes of here, serving well over 10 million people a year, I have realized this is a destination. When you think about Gillette Stadium being 4 miles up the highway, and the restaurants and other supports that are here, we're halfway to the Cape from anywhere in Massachusetts, and consequently, yeah, it's a great area to live in. And I think the people here realize this is an industry that needs to be preserved, enhanced upon, and I do think the addition of this particular group into this area would certainly augment an already very desirable place to live. So I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate each of you being here tonight and listening to the folks as they testify why they think it would also be good for them and for the town of Plainville. I want to thank all these folks behind me who have actually shown up here tonight. You've seen in many areas of the state that this hasn't been as widely supported by communities as it has been here. 80% of the folks, nearly 80% of the folks here in Plainville would like to see this. I do realize it doesn't make everybody happy, and there are people that will be, in their minds, negatively impacted, but I hope that what they hear tonight are ways that any of their concerns will be mitigated, and that they too, at some point, once this has come to fruition, will find that the improved artery here at Route 1, all of the other things that spin off from it, actually make their lives better here, not worse. So I appreciate you coming and listening to all of this tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ross. Thank you. And Representative Hewitt.
How it works.
Pardon me.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is my 3rd time, I believe, before you, Lakeville, Rentham, and tonight.
You'd think I'd learn.
That's true. That's true. Well, most people get it wrong all the time, so it's nothing new. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the And I have to say, I was very impressed with their presentation tonight. I'm ready to see them put the shovel in as quickly as possible. It's always difficult being the most junior member usually at some of these events because most of the items have been covered, and Betty and I do travel to many events together as we are, but our districts. My district is Norton, Seekonk, Rehoboth, and Swansea. So I straddle two big major cities, Attleboro and Fall River. And so Betty puts everything so eloquently and usually covers all the bases, and the senator, for the few bases that weren't covered tonight, I think covered them as well. Rehoboth, which is in the center of my district, is 48 square miles. And of that 48 square miles, you have about 11,000, a little over 11,000 residents. And of those 11,000 residents, I've been told that there are probably 2,000 horses. It's a big horse area, a lot of open space, a lot of ponds, trout fishing. It's a beautiful area. And one of the things I've found in my time growing up, third generation in Seekonk, people that have horses love horses. They put in so much extra work, cleaning the stalls, brushing them down, making sure that they're taken care of. Their barns are pristine, almost as pristine as someone who's a hobbyist in the automobile. It's really, truly amazing the way people feel about horses. And the horse industry in this area is so important. As Rep. Pori alluded to, there are so many ancillary businesses that are associated, not only hay and feed and mills that make the boards for these stalls. It is, you know, the pickup trucks, the trailers, all this excise tax that the towns receive because of the horse industry. Unfortunately, Bristol County has some of the highest unemployment in the state. It's about 9.6%, and it's been on the rise since April. April, it was 9.2%, according to the figures that I've most recently read. We have the opportunity to provide jobs. I've been in the construction industry my whole life, and I have to tell you that that industry, at least down in this area, is in horrible condition. You don't see trucks on the road like you used to, nor do you see equipment moving. So any type of construction, large projects would be beneficial to this whole area. Now, they had mentioned about hiring local individuals. There are a number of my constituents in the audience who have a connection to Plainridge. They, in fact, Tommy Mello, who has a turkey farm, Rainbow Turkey Farm, fresh turkeys. I'll put a little plug in for him. He's the blacksmith over there. Just as one example. And we do have a number of farms that do provide horses that do race there. So as a representative, my first focus is on the constituents in my district. Next, it's the towns and the aggregate of my district, and then the state. And using that as a springboard, I live right on the Rhode Island line, and it's sort of a joke up in Boston that I'm the Rhode Island rep. I actually sometimes have to go through Rhode Island to get to my house coming back from Boston if I take 95, unless I take the back roads. So I'm very familiar with what is going on in Rhode Island. And this is their biggest fear, as the presentation presented. Why else did they allow table games at Twin River? Clyde Barrow, who was at UMass, Dartmouth, I've sat down and spoke with him. And there was another concern recently about casinos and table games. And surprisingly to me, according to his studies, that people who go to slots aren't necessarily people that go to full casinos. So there is a diverse group, some going to slots, some going to full table games. But Rhode Island they get, probably $250 million of their revenue from the slots and the casino games in Rhode Island. That's a big part of their budget. So naturally, I don't think they would be happy to see Plainridge here, but that's not of our concern. Our concern is Massachusetts. And over 50% of the cars through registration plates that go into Lincoln are from Massachusetts. So I think it's important that we keep our revenue, take care of Massachusetts as best we can. And Plainridge, it's such a beautiful facility that they have planned here, and as previous speakers have spoken, the gems that we have in this area whether it be the TPC or Gillette Stadium. We are the epicenter outside of this 495 break, and I think it's so important that we here down in the Bristol County get a facility such as this. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Plainville. Thank you to the audience. And I hope when you make your decision that Plainville will be the choice of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Howitt. I'm going to suggest that the commissioners get a little bit of a break here, and then we will come back. We will start out with the select people from Plainville, then the town managers and administrators from surrounding communities, and then the public at large. So we'll be back in just a few, maybe 10 minutes or so.
Set? All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're prepared to resume. If you take your seats now, we'll be prepared to resume and hear from a number of other people who want to talk with us about the merits and their views about this project. So if we could ask everybody to take their seats now, please, so we could resume the process.
Yes. Yeah, he's got it.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to resume now. Chairman Crosby needs to attend to one matter involving the commission, and he'll resume and rejoin us in a minute. But as he said at the beginning of the proceedings, after the formal presentations from the applicant and the state representatives and senators, we're going to turn to the local representatives of the local government. And so I'd ask Mr. Fennessy, Mr. Rose, Ms.
ask that you
Absolutely,
allow them to go
absolutely.
forward. Thank
We'd be
you.
delighted to do that.
And it's
if-
Bill Ross from the town of Mansfield, Mark Fisher from the town of North Attleboro, and Bill Ketchum from the town of Rentham.
All right, delighted. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. Mr. Ross, do you want to lead it off, sir?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm here representing the town of Mansfield. We have negotiated a surrounding community agreement with Plainville and with the Pan National Group. We have forwarded that agreement to the Gaming Commission. We found them to be very professional, very cooperative in working with them. We had a little different take on how we wanted to proceed with the surrounding community agreement. We took it because I think I should preface this by saying Mansfield and Plainville meet at one small corner. And if you stand on that corner, you can have your feet in each community very easily. And so we do not share a lot of facilities. We do not anticipate a lot of issues. As a result of that, we were able to negotiate in our surrounding community agreement what amounts to a delay in examining any of the impacts until a year after the facility opens and up to approximately 1,250 slots are in place. And at that point, we intend to meet, if necessary, bring in professionals to help us analyze the situation and determine if there are any impacts. And so that is slightly a different approach, and I must say the Penn National folks were open to that and worked with us on that. The Board of Selectmen took that and found that to be acceptable and have approved the agreement, and I have, as Chief Executive, forwarded it to the Gaming Commission. The Board of Selectmen, I need to add, have taken a position of not opposing the project. They purposely said, we're not going to take a position of supporting it necessarily because we're not sure that's appropriate for us. But in their motion, they did say, we do not oppose the project moving forward. With that, I will defer and give time to my colleagues. If you do have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them now.
All right, Mr. Ross, thank you. Commissioners?
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you
Very
very
helpful,
much.
Mr. Ross. Thank you very much. Mr. Mark Fisher from North Attleboro, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, and the rest of the commission. I very much, on behalf of the town of North Attleboro, the Board of Selectmen, with us here a while ago was Selectman Joan Marquito, representing the town. I want to thank you for conducting this hearing tonight and giving us the opportunity again to address you. In particular, I also want to thank John Ziamba of your committee. He has been a tremendous help to me and the town of North Attleboro, and I understand quite a few other towns across the Commonwealth. Plainville and North Attleboro has had a tremendous relationship over the years. We share a lot of services. We happen to share a sewer treatment plant. We have combined a water treatment facility that we work with them on. We help one another with many, many aspects within the community. We have a great relationship with them, and the town of North Attleboro is very much in support of this project going forward for many reasons. One is that we do know it would be tremendously beneficial to the citizens and to the town of Plainville. But we also know that it would be tremendously beneficial to many citizens in the town of North Attleboro, citizens who are employed in various directly or indirectly with the facility. I'd like to talk about the applicant if I could. And I've been around a long time, and I'm always skeptical when I start getting into negotiations with companies the size of Penn National. And they have been nothing but 100% supportive with us in drawing up agreement, anything, absolutely anything we asked them to change or listen to with us, they complied 100%. We think that our concern, obviously, is to make sure the town is not adversely impacted. In our particular case, it is traffic on Route 152 and on Route 1. Route 1 is an important commercial development for us, and Route 152 has a design plan that's going to make that an important economic development area for us. But there's a point where traffic is good and where traffic isn't. At one point, people will avoid the area because of the traffic, and at other times, it's beneficial because it brings people by our retail establishments. We worked out an agreement with Penn National that we will establish a baseline of traffic, several different places on those routes prior to them opening, including if they granted the license and the commission allows them to have an interim opening, it would be prior to that. And as indicated by Mr. Ross, 1 year after they're fully open and operational, then we'll measure it. And they have agreed to mitigate any increases or adverse effect they've had on our community. We talked about concern. They had a lot of things in there, questions that you brought up this evening about their involvement with the businesses. What are they going to do with this inter-marketing plan and so forth, and employment? And I have to tell you, talking with businesses in our community and with the local regional chamber of commerce, they have come through with all of their promises thus far. The outreach that they've had, the work that they've done with the businesses in our area, and the job fair that they had was just tremendously successful and very a lot of high participation. So we thank them for that. The last category that really touched us, and tonight they had a slide up there about their charitable donations, over $12 million a year, and they had some national organizations that they contribute to. And obviously, when a dollar goes to a national organization, sometimes the trickle-down effect by the time it comes to the local communities is a little watered down. And we questioned that, and we were concerned about it. And Penn National has agreed to take on our local food kitchen that we run out of our town hall and have that be one of their charities and have food drives to support it. And that's big, because for us, we know whatever they do, 100% of it will go to the needy citizens of North Attleboro. And we want to thank them for that outreach and tell you thus far we're very pleased with the professionalism and the cooperation that Penn National had, and we hope that you look upon their application favorably. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you may have any.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Questions, colleagues?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you belatedly, Mr. Fisher, and your predecessor, Mr. Ross, for the promotion. But we have one chairman, Chairman Crosby, and then Commissioner Zuniga, Commissioner Stebbins, and my able colleagues, including Commissioner Cameron. We're all equals, and so we have no vice chairman. I'm simply in possession of the microphone for the moment. Next, Mr. Ketchum.
Thank you, members of the commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I am here on behalf of the Town of Rentham Board of Selectmen. I have one member of the Board of Selectmen in attendance with me this evening, Ms. Gail Pratt. However, I will be speaking for the board. When this first came up, and in fact before we started discussing a surrounding community agreement, our board did discuss the coming development at Plain Ridge. And the one generally accepted feature after we learned that the citizens of Plainville had voted in favor of the project was to state that the town of Rentham is fully in support of the citizens of Plainville in their making of that choice. However, we did wish to have some outlet to address possible concerns which our Rentham citizens might have about impacts on the town. This came very promptly from Penn National with the designation of Rentham as a surrounding community, which we accepted, and we entered on several weeks of good back and forth negotiations, which involved not only meetings between myself and our special counsel with Penn National, but also attendance by Penn National representatives at 2 public meetings with our Board of Selectmen, where they answered numerous questions. We came to an agreement with which our selectmen were quite happy, and which we have signed, and it is my understanding has been transmitted to Penn National and to the Commission. It is also based, as was said earlier by the other towns, on a future analysis of a baseline and then an analysis of impacts. And Penn National has been very clear in statements at the public meetings, in its commitment that they will pay for impacts to the town. And the town of Rentham is very appreciative of the way it was dealt with by Penn National, and we feel that we came to a fair and mutually acceptable agreement. My board has voted to advise the commission that we support the application for a license before you from Penn National, and that we in fact urge that you act favorably thereon. I thank you very much for this opportunity to address you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions which you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Ketchum. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and now, Mr. Fernandez, I think we're ready to come to the representatives of Plainville. Would you like to say a few more things?
Well, let me first introduce to you, and I know she wants to speak and address you, Andrea Susi, the longest-serving, actually the longest-serving elected official in Plainville, but certainly longest-serving selectman. The other 2 selectmen, one is on his way, and I'm not sure as to whether the other will make it.
All right. Then select person Susi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I think Penn National coming to Plainville would not only be excellent for Plainville, but I think it would also be very good for this particular region of Massachusetts. One of the oldest stables, to the best of my knowledge, in Massachusetts is right here in Plainville. And I just forgot the name again, Charlie. Ralston Stables. They still have an original dirt training track, and it's been here since God invented dirt, I think. It goes back that far. On the other hand, a friend of mine who recently retired has just opened another stable up on Warren Street. Mr. Ronick has one of the most beautiful barns I've ever seen. He doesn't have a home there yet, but the horses are doing fine. I mention this because horse farms have always been a very major part of the fabric of Plainville. I did the town history for the website, and in doing my research on that and for the centennial that we had a few years ago, I was amazed at how many horse farms we actually have within our boundaries. We're only about 11 square miles. And I lost track of the exact number. I had it, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But we have quite a few. And it's been an important part of this community for many, many years. Sadly, excuse me, horse racing doesn't attract the numbers that it used to as far as being able to have larger purses. By combining the Plain Ridge site with Penn National, I think we could enliven live racing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think that's a very important thing. I would hate to see us lose live racing. It's been so much a part of the very spirit of this area of Massachusetts for so long. And here's a chance to see that it is given a new opportunity to thrive again. And I'm hoping that you will look favorably on this application. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Fernandez, if I could count on you to alert me when any of the other select people appear, or we'd be happy to hear from you now before we proceed to the general public.
Certainly. And in thinking of what to say tonight, I was struck by the fact that there's probably nothing I could say you hadn't heard before. Is this important to Plainville? Of course it is. It's important to Leominster. It's important to Raynham. 2 points that I will make. You know better than I the impact the legislation or the import the legislation had on horse racing. I think of the 3 applicants, we're the only ones that have a bona fide plan and interest in continuing racing, therefore fulfilling that tenet of the legislation. The other being our host community agreement. With no disrespect to any other community, when you look at ours, on its face, it's the most generous that's been negotiated. Certainly on a per capita basis, there's no comparison. So those are the only 2 things that I think I wanted to say that are unique, that you have heard, but I'll reemphasize. What I would like to do, I'm going to go off script, so to speak, and this may be unusual, but I'm pleased to be joined by someone who I know you know, Town Council, Jonathan Silverstein, and to his left is our consultant, Will Cummings. And it strikes me between my employment and their engagement, you have before you, I think, people who I'd like to think are well qualified to speak to the impact on the entity known as the government or town of Plainville. And I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think I can speak at least on behalf of the 76% of folks who voted in favor of this. So I'm really going to turn the tables on you. My fear has always been, as I watch you folks, that people are assuming they know what it is that you want to hear. I have some misgivings that I'm that bright. So I'm going to ask you point blank, individually, what is it that you want to know about the entity of Plainville, the governmental unit, and to the extent 76% are supportive of this, what is it that I can answer for you? And Commissioner Cameron, what questions, if any, that I can perhaps answer for you?
Mr. Fernandez, you've spoken to us many times. This isn't the first time you've been before us. I think it's very clear to me that you are supportive of this project, that through the trying times of one applicant and then another, you continue to be supportive. So that piece is clear. The 76% of the vote, I believe, speaks for itself. That's a very impressive number of residents who would like to see this project move forward. So the applicant has been very thorough in their presentation to us as well. So I don't have any additional questions of you, sir. I think you've let us know over the time we've all been working at this what your feelings are, and you've spoke eloquently about the community and how much all of this means to you.
Thank you. Commissioner McHugh, anything that...
No, from
has
my
not been
part,
addressed?
Mr. Fernandez, and thank you for that question, I'm very much interested in hearing what people want to say. We have been deeply immersed in processing these applications. Each one of the commissioners has taken and is responsible for a section of the application. We've been going through them line by line, letter by letter, it would seem, in some cases. And so we have a perspective on the applicants. We've listened to the applicants. We've looked at the applications. And sometimes you can get so focused on that you miss other things. And that's part of what this, from my standpoint at least, community process is about, to hear what people want to say to us so that we can ensure that we haven't overlooked something that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
Commissioner Stephens, anything I can...
No, I think Commissioner Cameron covered it. You know, we've had the opportunity to work with you throughout this process and members of your board, and I think their passion and support and engagement of this process has been very evident and very clear, and that we understand through them how important this project is to the community.
Commissioner Zuniga.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Just approximately speaking, could you share the percent in terms of town finances that Plainville would lose if racing stopped, and compare that to what the host community agreement provides if the license went to Penn National? Just roughly speaking, percentage-wise, relative to your current budget.
Our budget for the current fiscal year is approximately $27 million. Tax levy is $16 million. As you know, this, and one of the components currently of that $27 million budget is our local share of racing tax, which unfortunately has diminished over the course of the last few years. We're down to about 165,000, but you know, that's 3 or 4 police officers. In any case, the host community agreement has within it a agreement to pay $1.5 million in property tax so that we're not struggling over assessments or whether personal property is owned by the licensee or a third party, so that's all been ironed out. The agreement also has a $100,000 community impact payment, and of course the lion's share is the $2.7 million in terms of community payment. So collectively, that's $4.3 million. You can imagine that not having that opportunity, and that's what it is. I mean, the only thing we would lose, to be candid, is the $165,000. The property will still be taxed. But, and I had this discussion earlier with a firefighter. Since 2009, we had, for the first time in my 21 years here, layoffs. We've actually shut off 2/3 of our streetlights. We have not hired additional staff. People have been, who had not been laid off, their hours were cut, and we've been trying to hold our own in the ensuing 4 years. So what this represents is an opportunity to restore some of those core services. It represents the ability to replicate a building like this for municipal purposes and fire purposes, and I won't bore you with how inadequate those facilities are. So this is just a huge opportunity. Is it it's an opportunity lost, obviously, if it doesn't happen, but other than losing the $165,000, that represents probably the only true loss.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, if there are any questions of these folks, they've seen the process, and again, it's been a very thorough process in terms of public hearings, in terms of impact on the community, so if you have questions, then please.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Fernandez. Any questions further for town officials?
No.
All right, then let's turn to the public segment of this. We have a number of people who've requested an opportunity to speak, and I'm going to call them in basically the order that we have them on our list, and that's the order in which they signed up. In doing this, we are eager, as I said a minute ago to Mr. Fernandez, to hear what you would like us to hear. But in deference to everyone who wants to speak and the hour of the evening, we would request that you be brief, that you not repeat what others have said, and that you bring your thoughts succinctly to the table. So I'm going to call a number of names, and perhaps people could simply line up. I'm not going to call that many in a row, but that would facilitate the coming to the microphone and our ability to proceed through this in an appropriate fashion. So let's start with James Howard, Ned Merrick, Bill Abdelanur, and Constant Polek Jr. Are any of those people here? And
I feel like I won the lottery.
that's next week.
Oh, next week. I'd like to welcome the commission to Plainville.
Your name, sir?
My name's James Howard. I'm Financial Secretary Treasurer of Norfolk Central Labor Council, AFL-CIO. We are an arm of the AFL-CIO, that an umbrella organization that covers 35 locals that operate within Norfolk County. A number of my affiliates are involved in this project. I was the advocate, the AFL advocate, with Penn National in introducing them to the Machinists Union and the Seafarers Union. I can speak for the Machinists Union because I'm a 42-year member of that union. And what I would like to say, first I'd like to say Penn National, I find them to be a very credible group, very principled group. I'm a retired business agent from the Machinists Union, and it's been a pleasure dealing with these people. They're very upfront and honest. There's no games. One of the commissioners asked the question about the Machinists Union, which I can speak to. The Machinists Union is not just a group of people that stand around lathes and machines making parts or cars or shaping material. We have people in the hospitality industries. We have people in the airline industry that deal directly with the public, ticketing agents and such. We actually have doctors in our union, MDs down in New York. We've organized a group down there. We do building maintenance. Anything in a building that moves or requires electricity or machine movement, we can handle it, we fix it, we repair it, we replace it. So I just wanted to point that out to the commission to clear up any doubts in your minds that the Machinists Union was not capable of performing the duties necessary in regards to the slots. The other thing I would like to say is that, excuse me, my day job is with the United Way of Mass Bay, and I'm a labor liaison with them. And so one of my first questions to Penn National was, well, what do you folks do for the community? What do you do to pay back to the communities? You know, National, I think I'm going to hit them up for a donation for the United Way. So, you know, they told me that they give to the United Way, and they do this, that, and they pay back to their communities. So I went back and I used my resources at the United Way, and I checked into it. And they do indeed pay back to the communities. And I think it was one of the selectmen mentioned that it was a trickle-down process, and it's not. They contribute directly to the community, charities, the YMCAs, the food banks and such. So it doesn't go through a third-party agent such as the United Way. And I think that's good for the community. I think the community needs it. And this community, in addition to that, this community needs those jobs. I mean, I live and breathe jobs. Everything's jobs with me. And for every single good-paying union job that Penn National gives to us, that's going to support 3 to 5 other jobs in the community that those workers live in. So that means the local dry cleaner, well, maybe not so much the dry cleaner, he doesn't make much out of us. But, you know, the local delis and restaurants and the bars and, you know, the whole gamut of business within the community will profit from this. So I just would like to take all that into consideration and approve this applicant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howard.
Any
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank
No.
you.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Edward Merrick, resident of Plainville. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me a few minutes to address you today. I have testified before this commission previously, and because I have respect for your time and everybody else in the room, I will not
We
repeat any of that.
deeply appreciate that, let me tell you.
I would, however, like to address some concerns that have been raised recently, more specifically by some opponents of this venture coming to Plainville, as well as some issues that were raised by surrounding communities. From a financial perspective, the host community agreement between Penn National and the town speaks for itself. It is indeed a great deal, perhaps the best of all the Class II applicants, and that's enough said on that. However, the concerns raised by local opponents of any expanded gambling operation in Plainville, you should know that are similar to those raised in 1999 when Plainridge sought to open a racetrack in Plainville. The worries of an increase in crime and a potential for an infusion of an unsavory criminal element simply did not happen. As you are aware, I was the chief of police for Plainville when the track opened in 1999 and remained such until my retirement some 10 years later. Based on their security plan back then, I was supportive of the placement of the racetrack in our town. And quite frankly, nothing has happened since that would tend to erode that support. Calls for service generated from the racetrack were minimal at best, and most were handled quite efficiently by the detail officer assigned to that facility. There was never a strain on the town's public safety resources. Now, I do acknowledge that events surrounding the suitability investigation earlier this year were troubling, and things did not look good for the future of the racetrack. The entrance of Penn National clearly saved the day, but went way beyond merely being the white knight. I have spoken to many of the principals of Penn National on several occasions, have heard firsthand of the plans for the facility and their commitment to the host community, and I have come away convinced that not only will they be a good fit for our town, but they will be a good corporate neighbor that we anticipate. Their past performances elsewhere in the country also bear out my assessment that they get it. They know how to operate in a small community, and they do so with great success. The other concern that has been raised is the potential impact on neighboring public safety resources. And again, I hearken back to my experience as chief of police, and I can tell you that the number of mutual aid calls at Plainridge from 1999 to 2009 is 0. While it is true that a Class II gaming facility is likely to attract more people and more traffic, the attempt to estimate additional burdens on surrounding public safety agency is pure conjecture at this point. Penn National has gone to great lengths to mitigate traffic concerns and has even proposed to fund an impact study 1 year from the date of opening. It is then, and only then, that an objective assessment can be made as to actual impacts. I do recall when the retail outlets were proposed for this area of town, there were many who predicted doom and gridlock. That, too, has simply not come to pass. In short, members of the commission, Penn National has covered all the bases, just as I thought they would. Plainville is deserving of this opportunity, and Penn National is deserving of this license. The residents of Plainville have received a plethora of information about the good, the bad, and the ugly of expanded gaming. I dare say that the voters here in Plainville are perhaps the most educated group in the state on expanded gaming, and certainly far and beyond what has been received by the residents of the two competing communities. That education is a credit to the town officials who provided it and Plain Ridge Park who paid for it. And armed with that information, the voters of Plainville approved the referendum by a margin of over 76% in September. I would submit to this commission that Penn National and Plainville have met the requirements for licensing. We have community economic benefits that surpasses the others, and we have a well-educated electorate who has overwhelmingly accepted this proposal, as well as our new neighbors. I respectfully urge you to award this Class II gaming license to Penn National and Plain Ridge Park Casino. And I thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Chief Mayor.
Thank you,
very much.
Chief.
Thank you.
I was going to start by saying good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. And again, welcome to Plainville, the town I like to refer to as the small town with a big heart. My name is Bill Abdelno, and I'm the president of the New England Amateur Harness Drivers Club. With us tonight are members of every standardbred organization in this area and beyond. We have the Harness Horsemen's Association of New England. We have the Breeders, Standardbred Owners and Breeders of Massachusetts. We have the Standardbred Pleasure Organization. And all the way from Maine, we have members of the Maine Harness Horsemen's Association with us tonight. Some who've traveled from as far up as Bangor just to be here tonight. We understand that there's a lot of people that want to speak. Some already have, very eloquently, I might add. Excuse me. I've been fighting a cold for 4 days. I wasn't missing this for the world. Out of respect for this commission, and without taking too much of your time, and without sounding repetitive, I will speak on behalf of these organizations and the hundreds of people they represent. I'm not here to talk about locations. We know Plain Ridge is the best location. I'm not here to talk about Plainville. We know it's a great little town. Certainly, I can't say too much more about the applicant. I mean, in my eyes, they're rock stars. But I will say this. It's about people. It's about people and the far economic impact that this Category 2 license is going to have. These are people with families. These are people, excuse me, these are people with families and homes and a passion for harness racing. People who religiously show up for work every morning, put a full day's work in. They don't get holidays, and they don't get sick days. Much like I did when I taught school. I retired with 200 sick days. They get none. They're blue-collar workers who strive every day to provide for their families. The economic impact goes well beyond the horsemen and women here at Plain Ridge. It impacts all the businesses that are directly connected to the harness racing industry. The feed and equipment suppliers, the breeding farms, as well as the farms that provide open space for our horses. These people who for years have hoped that this day will come, it's here. This commission is going to make the biggest decision in their lives. I promise you that. The quality of life for these people can change forever with just a stroke of a pen. Penn National has given us and our industry hope with their plan to integrate racing and gaming, something they've done very successfully just north of us in Bangor, Maine. But we all know it takes a lot more than just hope, because hope alone isn't enough. That hope must become a reality, something this commission can do. By joining these two, gaming and racing, you will save an industry with a proud history, well over 200 years old, and it started right here. while changing the lives of hundreds and hundreds of people, not to mention the huge economic impact on the Commonwealth. Penn National, Plainridge, the town of Plainville, and the horse standardbred community have done everything humanly possible. There's nothing left for us to do. And if we're awarded that Category 2 license, if Penn National is awarded that Category 2 license, so many lives will change forever, and an industry with a storied history will live on. No other applicant, I want to repeat that, no other applicant has such a far-reaching effect on so many people as Penn National, and only this commission can make all these things happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have the Finakis.
No, I think I closed the last.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Pohelic. Sorry.
Good evening, members of the commission.
Could you turn the mic up a little bit, too? Okay.
Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Constant Poholic, co-owner of Wentworth Hills Country Club with my sister and brother-in-law, Karen and Elmo Finocchi, here to speak in behalf of, in favor of the Plainridge Casino. Being a small business owner, we see thousands of customers through Wentworth Hills Country Club and also through Heather Hill, our affiliate, and thousands of people, guests, travel to our courses throughout the season. And this is a win for the town of Plainville because of the fact that with the golf courses, we actually see people from surrounding communities, not only in the Attleboro, North Attleboro, Plainville, Rentham area, but we see businesses as far north as Boston, in the Metro West area, Worcester, Rhode Island. It's a good indication to us on a daily basis where our customer base comes from, because we're constantly always asking our customers, where do you drive from? That being said, with the casino and with Plainridge, we believe the customer base will actually be not only from local, but from at least a 75 to 100-mile radius and more. Plainville, this is good for Plainville because it's a destination town. Especially with golfing, we find that it's more of a destination, and with Plainridge, the Plainridge Casino, people will come to Plainville not only for the surrounding casino and the restaurants and the shopping area, but they'll also come as a destination and recreation area. It'll produce a lot of revenue, and it'll increase the business in an area where we're having difficulty with economic times due to job losses. With the Marquee program that Penn National was, I spoke with the representatives. The Marquee program is something with the business affiliates that would actually help the community. They're actually giving dollars back to the community through Plainridge, through their customer appreciation program. We, as a local business, would participate in the Marquee program, enhancing the area by allowing their customer base to spend dollars in various businesses in the community, such as the restaurant, such as the recreational facilities of Wentworth Hills, Heather Hill Country Club, the surrounding Rentham outlet. Through the affiliate program, we're able to not only as a destination, the customer base would derive not only the casino, but it would also increase the with the Rentham outlet. So the whole the impact that it would have on the community would be such that it would actually benefit us and the community. So I think it's a win for the community. We're lucky to have an organization such as Penn National come into the community, and we welcome them as a local business owner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we are ready to invite members of the public in general. There are, I don't know, 30 or so anyway who have signed up here, something like that. We are anxious to hear everybody's comments, but we would ask you, for reasons which are obvious, to please do us and the other people who wish to speak the favor of keeping your comments very brief. If you have something new to say, we're particularly interested in hearing that. But if you want to reinforce points that have been made before, pro or con, we are anxious to hear it, but hope you will please do it as succinctly as you possibly can, out of deference to all of us. I'll read off the names of people as they're on the sheet, and just why don't a handful of you begin to line up. Lenny Calderon, Tom Lawler, Gerard Dugan, Mr. Merrick, I think we heard from. Ned Merrick we heard from. Tom Mello, Mark McAvoy. Come on, sir.
Good evening, Chairman Crosby, members of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. My name is Lenny Calderon. I'm the track announcer and simulcast director at Plain Ridge Racecourse. I'm here tonight to represent my fellow employees at the racetrack. And when told about tonight's public meeting, all of the employees wanted to be here, and I know most are. Just a handful of others could not be due to their working responsibilities at the racetrack, which we're open for simulcasting tonight, so that's where they're at. Whether here nor there, our employees do have a message. The message is clear. The message is simple. We have all come too far for too long to have such a golden opportunity pass us by without weighing in on the potential outcome. Like myself, most of my fellow employees have worked at Plain Ridge Racecourse since the track opened in 1999. During the past 14 years, we have all seen our share of good times and bad times, but through it all, we've endured. And we've endured because we have all bunkered down during tough times to make it work. Working at Plain Ridge Racecourse has become a way of life, and we do not want it to end. The past several months have brought uncertainty. However, Penn National Gaming's option to buy Plain Ridge Racecourse has given us all hope. In this hope lies our dream, a dream of prosperity where we can continue working and making a living at what we do best, a dream of a thriving racing and gaming facility that will give us all a better opportunity to grow, a dream of a racing industry that's kept alive where everyone can prosper, and a dream of a thriving community right here in our town of Plainville, Massachusetts. In closing, Chairman Crosby, members of the Gaming Commission, the employees at Plain Ridge Racecourse, leave you one final thought. We are standing on the doorstep of destiny. Let's seize the moment. Please do not let our dreams die. We respectfully ask that you grant Penn National Gaming the slot license and let us prove to you that Plain Ridge Racecourse is the right location and the right choice to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Lawler. I'm a Plainville resident, and I'm representing the Plainville Lions. Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, the Plainville Lions Club is firmly supporting the application of Penn National Gaming to operate an expanded gaming facility at the Plain Ridge Racecourse in Plainville, Mass. I'm sure that you're aware of the great humanitarian work that the Lions clubs do, and our club is no exception. The community service work we do for Plainville is second to none, and every dime we raise goes back into the community as required by our Constitution and bylaws of the Lions Clubs International. Since Penn National Gaming has stepped into the picture, we were naturally concerned that one of our major community supporters would go by the wayside. Thankfully, Penn National has stepped up and convinced us, not only by word, but by actions, that they will be the partner for community service that we have come to count on. They have a long history of community involvement around the country that we know will be replicated here in Plainville, and we look forward to a long-term partnership with them. We have met with several of the key personnel from Penn National, and we took an active role in the Get Out the Vote for the town effective last month. They're the real deal. They say what they mean, and they mean what they say. We find them extremely refreshing for corporate America. We believe that they are deserving for this license they seek, and we respectfully ask the Commission to grant a license for a Class II gaming facility to Penn National and Plain Ridge Park Casino. Thank you for your time, for hearing me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. My name is Gerard Dewey. I'm the Seafarers International Union New England agent. And I will be brief in my comments. I just wanted to give you some additional information to follow up on the comments and the information that you received earlier tonight from Penn National officials. In fact, I know on the face of this that it appears, and I could tell by looking at your faces, that you were a little perplexed as to how seafarers who represent professional merchant mariners have become involved in the gaming industry. And it started, quite truthfully, 10 years prior to the change in federal law in the early 1990s, late 1980s, that enabled casino riverboat gaming largely in the Midwest. It started earlier with our involvement with a company called American Hawaii Cruises in the Hawaiian Islands. They had a 3-ship fleet which traversed in opposite directions and on a regular schedule the islands of Hawaii. We became involved because not only did those vessels, as naturally required, would require the classifications of ABs, QMEDs, and all the assorted ratings that are required in the Coast Guard for the operation of any U.S. domestic maritime vessel. But there were a whole list of, as you can imagine, classifications that had to deal with hospitality, that being whether it be bartenders or waiters or waitresses or hospitality staff, cleaning staff, a large number of classifications in the steward department, which quite truthfully went on for 2 full pages. That set the basis for our involvement in the riverboat gaming industry when it was finally enacted in the early 1990s. And at the very beginning of the conversations we had with multiple companies who were interested in securing the licenses and acting as operators for those riverboat gaming licenses, we offered to be able to fulfill their requirement via the Coast Guard that you have trained and certified maritime personnel. What we brought to the table was the fact that we already had a decade of experience in training, identifying training, and putting people in jobs on those vessels in the Hawaiian Islands. As it morphed over a couple of years, the riverboat gaming industry largely had a sail before gaming operations could take place. Well, you know, for a number of factors, the Coast Guard and local the states changed that requirement simply because there are large months of the year during clement weather in the winter months and in the summer months when they're the dry spell, that the vessels couldn't leave the dock and in fact couldn't generate revenue but through gaming operations, which would then, you know, be a detrimental factor for the states who had planned on certain degrees and projections of revenue. And over these last 20 years, we have not only worked with Penn National, we worked with and for a number of companies, and in fact, a short list of the states that we represent, members represent workers in the facilities, both casino gaming and hospitality in Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, and Illinois, Kansas, and in Maryland. And we work closely with a number of the other local unions, and that's why we are partnering with the machinists. We each bring a different and unique skill set to this, and we will be able to match up those skill sets with the history that we have, with the expertise and the vast different classifications of jobs that the machinists have. In addition, you should also know, too, that we just don't partner with the machinists. We have partnered with other organizations like the United Food and Commercial Workers, and we represent workers in their facilities in Maryland. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have as to why the seafarers are involved with Penn National. We have a long, strong, and very good relationship with Penn National. They are a very good employer. They provide for their employees, and I can guarantee you from experience that whatever they tell you here tonight and they make any representation they make, they wholeheartedly keep that commitment. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and if there's any questions I might answer in addition to that, I'd be happy to.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Mello, this side. Tom Turkey, this side. I'm a horseshoer and I have a turkey farm, and I'm really proud to be in front of all these successful people. And I want to thank Penn National for stepping up. I have a dream.
That's the turkey side.
Oh, now that's not right. I want to get kicked out. No, we're really fortunate that Penn National stepped up. My dream is, I have 2 boys and 5 grandchildren. And my past experience, I've been through 9 racetracks closed in my lifetime. I worked at 9 different racetracks, and they all closed. And I'm hoping that I won't be at another one. I want to talk a little about why I say horseshoeing on this side, turkey on this side. My father was a successful farmer, and he wanted to be. My best friend, Jimmy Mitchell, on the other side, was a successful horseshoer, that he only had 2 daughters and 1 son, and I was the son that he wanted to be. So I had my father telling me, you got to be a farmer, Jimmy telling me, you got to be a horseshoer. In Plain Ridge, I won the President's Award, the Appreciation Award. I shod some of the best horses. We should all be proud of Al Ross and everybody that lives in Massachusetts, that the Massachusetts homebred, born, raised by Al Ross, won the biggest race that you could win this year. And I think he won his dream. My dream is that Plain Ridge still stays open, the farm keeps going, and one of my grandchildren or my sons can take it over, because that's my dream. And I'm so happy to be in a building with so many successful people that I'm sitting back and say, I wish that's my daughter or my son or my granddaughter or my grandson sitting up there. And I want to just thank you for having let me has to this little opportunity to talk to you people. And I hope you vote the right way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Mr. McAvoy, Art Roy, Jack, is it Lane or Lank? Jack Shepherdson, Chris Murphy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. My name is Mark McAvoy, and my wife Kathy and I have lived in Plainville for just under 39 years. And both of our children were born and raised here. And I'm speaking to you today in support of Penn National being awarded the license. I'm going to give a little twist on this because as part of my 39 years here in Plainville, I was on the Finance Committee for 5 years. So I might come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. We talked about the loss, or Joe talked about the loss of the harness racing fees if we didn't get the license. But from my perspective, that's not the bottom line, because over the course of time, as budgets continue to rise, there would have to be severe cuts if we didn't have such a good revenue stream as what Penn National can provide. Without a thriving commercial base, town budgets will continue to be squeezed and cut. Taxes will likely escalate to the point where many of us have a hard time paying our taxes and may, in fact, ultimately wind up losing our homes because we can't pay them. And I'm not talking about this being an instantaneous process, but over the course of many years. In my humble opinion, I think Penn National, from what I've seen, and it's a first-class organization for sure, and I've been a bean counter for a long time, sat with a lot of lawyers, sat with a lot of accountants. Penn National is the cream of the crop from my perspective. So, Mr. Chairman, after hearing all the arguments, I would respectfully ask you and your fellow commissioners to award the license to Penn National so that we won't have to suffer any of these setbacks, and that we can continue to grow and prosper and thrive as a community at whole. I kindly thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak, and eagerly await your decision at the end of February.
Thank you.
Arthur Roy, 74 Warren Street, Plainville, the western part of the town. The horse farms, most of them are over there. A few points I want to mention here, just 4 or 5. One is I'm also a member, I'm the chairman of the Board of Registrars, and it was mentioned about 76% voted in favor of this back in September. We also had 37% of the registered voters that turned out. That was the highest of the 3 towns that voted. The other comment is I mentioned about the fee that Mr. Fernandez and you had a discussion with, and Mr. McElroy just expounded on. I too want to go further, and that is, back in when, and I forgot the year, Foxborough Park closed, but when it closed, there was a couple of horse farms that went out of business. They sold to developers, and they were, developments went there, and so you had real estate taxes, which is a burden to towns. Most of the farms in town stayed in business, and thankfully, Plainridge, stepped up and were operational in '99, and some of them have actually expanded since then. And I want to go back to, so if my concern, and I think you've heard it from many politicians and speakers, that this is about saving the standardbred racing industry, not only in Plainville, but in this state. That graph that showed, that last graph that had all those farms and vendors displayed, how many of those are going to remain in business if the standardbred business industry goes away? How many will move to Maine or New Jersey or New York? And what will happen to that land? Will they be turned into developments and a tax burden on those towns because there'll be houses? So that's something to consider when you're making your decision. Another point is, my last point actually, is a couple of the politicians, the senator and the representative, got up and spoke about the great venues surrounding this community, that this would be a great destination place, what is it called, the center of the universe. Well, I hope that you grant Plainridge and Penn National the license so that Plainville can have its great venue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much. My name is Jack Lank. I'm the president of the United Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we cover the 16 communities that surround Plainville. Many people have spoken to you about how great Penn National is. I have to reinforce that. We were one of the first organizations that they reached out to. They have reached out to most of my membership in all the 16 communities. We're very proud to partner with them with their last vendor fair and job fair, where we had hundreds of people come in, many dozens of my members come in to talk about doing business with them, all the different vendors, from the sign vendors to the contractors. Everything that Penn National has said since they've come into this region has come true. Everything that they've promised, they've come through with. So we've submitted it, my board of directors has submitted a letter to you in full support of giving them this license. One of the things that you touched on a little bit earlier is the employment of the veterans. I'm proud to say I'm on a national board for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In October, I was down in Washington, D.C., and I met with the vice president of Hiring Our Heroes, that is the program through the U.S. Chamber for hiring all of the veterans. And they've already promised us that when Penn National is ready, they will come up and partner with us to help hold job fairs for the veterans and for all the veterans-owned businesses in the area. So I think these guys have covered the bases as far as every facet of our region. And this isn't just going to be a boost for Plainville. It's going to be a boost for our entire region. I'm responsible for the 16 communities and the businesses that are there. And I did speak to you once over in Rentham. This does have that ripple effect. You know, every small little business in the area is going to benefit. You know, somebody needs coffee before they get there. They need bread and milk before they go home. You know, that's where this money's going to go, because every dollar spent in the community, 68 cents stays right here in the local community. So we would wholeheartedly like to endorse Penn National and all their partners, and we hope that you will vote in their favor. Thank you very much.
Thank
Jack,
you.
Jack, before you, before you walk away, we've reached out to a number of chambers. As you probably know, are inviting your feedback on the current licensing regulation hearing process that we're going through, especially with respect to vendors. So we hope you'll weigh in and give us any thoughts and feedback you have on those regs.
Well, we did, and I hosted one of the conference calls to talk. I forget how, it was just not that long ago that we held the conference call. And, you know, it is a very fair process. It's a difficult process. You folks have, you know, a big decision to make, and there's an awful lot of people putting pressure on you. I'm sure there is. One of the things that I did do is I took the time to reach out to some of my cohorts in crime, so to speak, other chamber executives from around the country, from where they have their other facilities. And everything, again, that they've said has come true. They've dealt with the local vendors. They do 90% of local business. It has enhanced every single community that they have been involved in. And I've spoken directly to the people who they partnered with out in those different regions. And it has been really, really successful, and we hope that it continues here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Commissioners.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Jack Shepardson, 7 Branch Avenue, Lake Miramichi. I've been a professional taxpayer in Plainville for the last 52 years, not to mention to the Commonwealth, too. And I'm kind of an oddity, I was told. I don't know why, but
We're getting
in
an
all,
idea.
in all, I got to do a little more than the average citizen did in relation to getting to know the fine gentleman to my right side, and they are not turkeys. They're screaming eagles when it comes to energy and getting things done. My concern is representing the 1,325 seniors, because I haven't seen any up here yet, but speaking for myself and only myself, my concern is the open land issue, the senior citizens clubhouse, and other things that are subsidized by charity events. And one of the big concerns about seniors, along with others, as Mark had spoken about, is losing their homes because the tax base will erode if we don't get the extra cash flow. One of the things that happened to me, I made the mistake of going to the Plain Ridge office down on Route 1 and met Dominic Longabotti. And now Dominic thinks I'm on staff because I go down there so much because I am retired and live a boring life. So, so I got to go and get a VIP presentation at the track. And all the 52 years I've been here, I might have been to the track 6 times. Now they have to kick me out. So I got to see the restrictions put on by the state. I met the regulators at Plain Ridge. I met the police staff that are at Plain Ridge that monitored this. And it's well preserved. It's hard to breathe when you got Big Brother looking over your shoulder every time you turn around. But I also got to meet the Penn people, Jeff Morris and Eric Schiffer, who now they think that I'm on staff because I've been bugging them so much. I've been to Boston and all that. But my concern, like I say, is the open land. It's very important to me because I'm on the Conservation Committee. And I know there's these developers they call 40B vultures who are just waiting to land on some of this prime land. And I certainly don't want to see that. And I think some of my other senior friends would agree to that also. So the only way to keep these lands open is either one, we buy the land, which we're cash poor, so that's not going to happen. And the other is these good people on my right side, Penn National. And I've got to know these guys on many occasions, because like I say, I've been to Boston with them and all that kind of stuff. And they're for real. They talk the talk and they walk the walk. So with that said, I hope to see you again in February for the ribbon cutting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Murphy, Chris Murphy, and Marcia Bennis, Ellen DeAngelis, Charles Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Chris Murphy. I'm a 22-year resident of Plainville. My wife and I are in the midst of raising our 3 children here in town. I am also in front of you as the president of the People for Plain Ridge Committee. As thus, I speak for the 76% of the people that voted for this, voted for these gentlemen, voted for the horsemen, voted for the employees of the track. However, my thunder has been stolen, I have to admit. I had 9 different points I wanted to bring up. 8 of them have been talked about. So in deference to your time,
thank you,
the time of the folks here, I will make it very, very brief. Also, I trust that the commission was able to find Plainville with no problem due to its extraordinary, conveniently located to routes 195, 495, and 295. I believe so. Good. Trust you're able to find. I know in Rentham, Chairman Crosby had a little trouble getting to Rentham, so. But we'll move on from that.
Plainville was easy, no problem.
All right, very well, very well. Because my thunder has been stolen, and because everything I wanted to talk about has been basically mentioned to you, I would like to cede my time, my 2 to 3 minutes that I had here, to any of the opponents of the track that are here this evening. So I would gladly step aside and welcome any opponents of the track to come up and speak in my place. I do reserve 2 minutes at the end of this gentleman's
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I thank you for the time to speak. My name is Colin Ernst. I'm a resident of Foxborough. I unofficially represent the parents of young children. As you may have noticed, it's a fairly, for our last speaker, a fairly homogeneous crowd here tonight. A 4 to 7 p.m. meeting is almost an impossibility for parents with young children, with sports, after-school activities, CCD, and difficult for working professionals like myself. Didn't have to take time off of work to be here, but this is an important issue. I want to tip my hat to those in the horse racing industry here tonight. I admire you and thank you for your work as a part of the fabric of Massachusetts. However, I question as to whether much of this discussion was about the suitability of a casino or whether the state should use some of its newfound tax dollars to subsidize the horse racing industry and save those jobs, rather than put in motion the widely accepted and documented negative impacts of casino gambling. As mentioned, I'm a resident of Foxborough, a community that has vehemently opposed casino gambling in this area, as have many of Foxborough's neighboring towns. In fact, I probably live closer to Plain Ridge facility than most of the people here who live in a neighboring town. My intent is not to vilify Penn National, nor the Gaming Commission. Please allow me to set some context, though. I want to remind with respect the Commissioner of a recent interview on New England Cable News. In that September 13th interview, Mr. Commissioner, you talked about local control of casino-related decisions and the resulting impacts on communities. During that interview, you were asked whether you wanted a casino near your home. For those of you who missed the interview, his response was, just as long as it's not too close, and cited concerns about property value. As long as it's not too close to your home. I'd ask all the commission members to please put yourself in my shoes as you listen to my comments that follow. Please consider the burden to neighboring towns not met by mitigation. I disagree with the statements made earlier that mitigation is above and beyond. I believe, in fact, it is insufficient. Bear in mind that the mitigation has not been adjusted to reflect the vastly expanded scope and marketing activities planned by Penn National. I don't think anyone here would disagree that what Penn has promised dwarfs Plain Ridge's existing current operations and their initial proposed plans. Yet mitigation has not been adjusted for Penn National's plans, and there are no assurances that it will be. Penn National has touted their 44.3 million person database. Already alluded to in their earlier presentation was the fact that the traffic may be beyond expectations and capacity, requiring off-site shuttling and parking. The commercial that was shown earlier tonight was as much about the alcohol as it was about the slot machines. Certainly there are more images of alcohol than horse racing. Think about this and consider the burden on police and fire departments. Think about the free alcohol in the aforementioned crowded parking lots. And consider the proper mitigation of alcohol-related motor vehicle homicide as those drivers take to the road. Maybe Penn's mitigation is sufficient for the expanded scope, as long as it's not near your home. The burdens of casino gambling are very real. Police, fire, roadways, infrastructure to educate an influx of ESL students, problem gambling, and other social burdens. These are challenges that small towns like ours are not equipped to bear that burden. The proposal as it stands is woefully inadequate and should not be considered. Speaking on behalf of my neighbors in Foxborough, it is irresponsible to award the license to Penn National as it represents a significant and unreasonable burden not addressed by mitigation to Plainville and surrounding towns. Finally, my comments may not outweigh the others you've heard in support of horse racing, or even those in support of the casino. But I ask that you hear my voice of opposition as if you were in my shoes. I'm fully aware that the Commission's job is to introduce the Commonwealth to the successful and ethical development of gaming. Let me also remind you that you have the responsibility to represent the rights of those who are opposed to casino gambling for all proposed casinos and all residents, not just when the site is too close to your home. I do thank you for your time. I thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ernst. I will say that Marianne Grenier, who has been one of the most forceful and articulate opponents and who has given us a great deal of information, was here. She left a 6-page statement that we all have and we will read. She's not able to be here, but I just wanted to recognize that she has taken the time to put together a long statement, which we will attend to.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ernst, thank you for your well-worded comments. Within those comments, you started to talk about alcohol and crowded parking lots and things of that nature, and I thought you were talking about Gillette Stadium every weekend, but no, aside from that. Foxborough has their moneymaker. Plainville, as Mr. Fernandez clearly indicated, and Mr. McAvoy clearly indicated, who sat on the Finance Committee for 5 years, is in darn near dire straits. We have cut and cut. We have turned off our street lights. I'm raising 3 kids on a dark street, and it is very dark on my street. This is my impassioned plea as a father who wants every opportunity to raise my children in a town where I won't be taxed out of my house, where I can take that money that I don't have to pay to the state or the town and put it toward my child's college education. 3 kids on their way to college, 1 in, 1 starting next year, 1 starting in 5 years. It's a daunting task. Anything that is going to lend itself toward expanding the opportunities for my children, I am in favor of. Now, we live in the busiest corridor in the United States. We will experience growth. That is undeniable. Through the newspaper reports, radio reports, TV reports, it is my concerned and considered and educated opinion that gaming will arrive in this state. How we handle that is very important. We have the ability right now to handle that in a prudent manner by dedicated people who see what's coming at us. We can do this as a collective. I have coached softball, baseball, and soccer for the last 17 years, since my oldest 22-year-old son was this tall. Plain Ridge came to town. Charlie Smith, help me out. Plain Ridge came to town in 14 years? 14 years ago. By the way, the gentleman who named Plain Ridge is sitting right there, Charlie Smith, former selectman. Plain Ridge, from day one, stepped up to buy advertising, to sponsor teams, to hold raffles that benefited youth athletics. Plain Ridge allowed my son, as a Boy Scout of America, who is an Eagle Scout now, to collect cans from the track for 4 solid years to raise money for his Eagle project. Plain Ridge has been a phenomenal neighbor. Much like, I assume, Gillette Stadium and the Kraft Group has been a phenomenal neighbor to the purses and pocketbooks of Foxborough. However, we have an opportunity here that is within our grasp, within sight, and I encourage you in the strongest manner to grant this license to this group in this town. in February. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marcia Bennis, excuse me, Ellen DeAngelis. I think Jean Marchant already spoke. Michael Rosenblatt. Chandri, oh, this is from the planning board? There we go, all right, welcome.
Thank you. Ellen DeAngelis, 10 Mayville Terrace in Plainville, Mass. I'm a Plainville resident. So first of all, Chairman Crosby, I want to say that I listen to you whenever you're on Nightside with Dan Ray.
Oh, thank you.
And I find it very informative and educational. And because I always come to all of these meetings, it helps me understand more about what the Gaming Commission is all about.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. I want to speak to a couple of comments that the opposing person took. I had to take time off of work to come here today because it was a very important meeting. And I didn't mind taking work off today because I knew I needed to be here to speak in favor of Penn National. The other thing is that when that person spoke about Penn National having to shuttle their workers to the site when there's too much traffic, the Rentham outlets every Black Friday shuttles their employees to the outlets. They cannot park at the outlets, and there's a lot of parking up there. I know this because I go to St. Martha's Church, and they actually have used our parking lot a couple of years to let their employees park there. So that's not uncommon. I think it's great that Penn National is taking the time to work with the surrounding areas to let them use their parking. It's very smart. The other thing is that I live off of exit 15, which is the Rentham Outlet exit, and I can't use that exit most of the time during the summer when there's long weekend holidays, big sales going on up there, Black Friday. I always have to use Route 1. So the fact that Route 1 is actually going to be made easier to get on and off of if Penn National is granted this license makes me very happy, because at least I know I'll still have a way to get home. Let's see. Just a couple of more. I want to let Penn National know that I appreciate the level of education that you've given to all of us in the short time that you've been here. They had to do a lot of ramp up and so forth, and we all had a little of information, but now we have a lot, and we were able to digest it and do a lot of great thinking about it to be able to come to our 76% vote just a few months ago. And then the last thing is so I do go to St. Martha's Church down in Plainville, and we just had our church fair. And we get people from all surrounding communities. And a lot of the comments that were going on through the day was about Penn National. And I did not hear one negative comment. I heard everybody say how happy they would be if Penn National could get the license, how many people would either themselves or have family members that would apply for jobs at Penn National, and they appreciated the fact that you didn't have to come in with any formal training to the jobs at Penn National, that they actually would train you in whatever job that you would be able to get. And some people actually said that they would actually come up with a song and dance just to have a job at Penn National right here in their hometown. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charles Smith, Michael Rosenblatt. Mr. Smith.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Charles Smith. I'm a former selectman, and I'll give you a little trivia. I was the chairman of the Board of Selectmen when Plain Ridge came to town. And they approached me when they were in Foxborough and said they had to move out, and came to me and said, do you think they would accept us in Plainville? You've got a large gravel pit over here of 90 acres off 495. My answer to them then was, tell me what you can do for Plainville, and then I'll tell you whether or not I think you belong here. And I take that same perspective tonight when I look at and listen to Penn National. Like Doug Flutie, I'm a lifelong Massachusetts resident, and I came to Plainville when I went to work for Texas Instruments in 1980 and purchased a home, and I've been here ever since. My concern is for the town and the people of this town. And even though I served in the planning board in the 80s and a selectman in the 1990s, And because of a commitment to my family, I did not serve beyond the 6 years as a selectman, and my daughter, who's now in college, appreciated that. But I never lost my concern, my commitment for this town. When I retired from Texas Instruments in 2000, after 20 years, I went into a partnership in a Chinese restaurant in Attleboro, which takes up a great deal of my time. And alluding to your diversity statement earlier, our restaurant operations is 2/3 minority, I being the only Caucasian. And I'll offer tonight to Penn to use our facility. We have a 8,000 square foot place. We have a big conference and a function room there. And if these folks want to come down and use it as a place to meet and plan and discuss and so forth, they're entirely welcome, free of charge. What I say to you is, the day that I stood up at the hill at 495 with the people who were the entrepreneurs who put Plainridge in place, we stood there and we looked around. It was a huge gravel pit with 495 and Route 1, and across the way was a mountain that used to be the landfill, and that was Plainville's source of income for years. And that landfill dried up. And I turned to them, and they say, Charlie, are there any, markers, any features, any landmarks here that we could? And I said, well, all we've got is a plain ridge looking down over this gravel pit. And that's how the name came about. And here we are today. So if anybody's mad about anything, they should blame me, because I'm the guy that started the ball rolling back there in the 90s. And I want to say to you...
remember you said that when people talk to us.
I understand, yeah, sure. I can take a beating. I wish Doug Flutie had stuck around, because he was always accused of not being tall enough. If he stood next to me, he'd have fell real tall. So come on back, Doug. What I'm saying to you is, to me, and I wrote a lot of editorials in the Sun Chronicle, a lot of op-ed pieces over the years, and I used to always allude to the importance about revenue and jobs in a small town like Plainville. And I made a reference one time, and I said, a town without jobs and revenue is a bird without wings. We don't want to be a bird without wings. We need something here. We need development in this town. And I always fought for that all the years I was in office, and I'll fight to it as long as I live. And what I think at this point, in my judgment, and I know this prevails throughout the town, we feel this is a town of great people. It's a great little town. And I think we've got a group here, from all I've read and heard and seen, and I've followed this. This is the first time I've come forward and spoke, but I've followed this whole process. And in my mind, Plainville and Penn National are a match made in heaven. And I urge you to consider them and certainly bring them to our town, and we'll work together to make this a better town, a better state, and everybody will prosper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On my list, I have the name of a gentleman from the planning board, Stanley, is it Weidler? You are the last speaker, I think, sir.
Stanley Wydack, Plainville Planning Board Chairman. We gave the original decision to RA Realty. First of all, Jack is a newcomer to me in the town of Plainville. Where Plainridge was, as Charlie expressed, it was a gravel pit. Well, I used to ride horses there before 495, so I'm a little familiar with the area. The only thing that concerned me tonight was the fact that Gail asked if the DOT would not approve the bypass, and I was a little nervous to hear that the DOT would not approve that. And I'm just hoping that the commissioners use their strength to make sure the DOT approves that, because that would take less traffic off our local roads. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Then, I think I mentioned earlier, we will not adjourn this meeting formally. We have to wait until we get all the surrounding community agreements in. We will then reconvene, probably here in town, and we're not quite sure what the format will be, but we will not conclude the meeting until then. But in the meantime, I would like to say, on behalf of the commission, but I'm sure they'll, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, all right, I apologize. Thank you. The applicant, I'm sorry, there's two things I skipped. I'm sorry. We had the town of Plainville had a chance to make their presentation, town manager Fernandez, if you would like to. And also the applicant had its chance to make a closing. My apologies. Thank you. Oh, he made his? All right. Okay, when I was out? Okay, fine. So I'm going to take this from the top. Everything I said, forget it. I was just kidding. Next up on the agenda is the closing remarks from our applicant.
Thank you, Mr.
My
Chairman.
apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We have nothing to rebut. We really appreciate and want to thank all of our supporters and opponent who came out tonight to talk about this important issue to the town of Plainville. It's hard for us to say it any better than what you heard tonight from the 30-plus supporters who spoke in favor of not just Penn National, but in favor of this project and what it means to the harness racing industry, what it means to the taxpayers, what it means to the seniors, what it means to one half of the turkey lovers in this community. It really is a humbling experience for us to be here to listen to that. We appreciate your time, your energy, your investment that you've put into this process. This is a Herculean task that you have before you, and we just look forward to continuing to work with you as this process unfolds. So thank you, and thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Now I would like to say thank you very much. This is a difficult process. The stakes are big. We care tremendously what you all think, and we deeply appreciate all of you who came out, pro and con, and we understand that the hour is taxing. Steve. Yes, but before I close, let me see if any other commissioners have anything to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to hold things up, but I did want to clarify that I did not say that DOT would not approve. We were just asking about if anything changes, was there a contingency, and that question was answered. So I just didn't want it out there that I'm saying that that's the case. Thank you.
Other comments?
We've got to get you a better script.
I'll say. Who wrote my script anyway? I'm just going to leave it at this. Thank you all very much for coming. Good night.